Welcome to episode 104 of the Hail Married podcast. I'm A. Tobes, and I'm joined by my husband, the Tobes. We're back to wrap up the regular season of UTSA basketball. Let's get started. We are the champions. Well, the women's basketball team, that is.
I thought you were going to sing that.
No one wants to hear that.
Yep. Ended the regular season at 26-3 overall and 17-1 in conference. Just, I guess you can say a dominant, just romp through the AAC this season.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we could probably sit here for 10 minutes just listing out all of the accolades for this season, but I think we have to call out we were undefeated at the Convo this season for the first time since 1984, 1985.
It's been a while.
It's been a long while. None of those players were alive at that point in time. And some of the coaches might not have been too. I don't know.
Yeah, that's true.
Program record 26 wins in a season and counting.
True.
And a record of attendance of 2250 on senior day. Just an amazing run, an amazing season. You know, it feels in a lot of ways kind of like that season for UTSA football when we, almost went undefeated and we won our first conference championship game.
I've been comparing us to that 2021, or I should say, I've been comparing the UTSA women's basketball team's 2024-2025 season with that UTSA 2021 CUSA first conference championship team. There are so many parallels. There's close wins. Looks like there's adversity. There's some close calls. I mean, there weren't flinches by opposing coaches, but there were mistakes by other teams that UTSA has just all season really taken advantage of. And that's, to me, what has made them such a championship team is that when their opponents falter, they take full advantage. And that's how we got to 26 and securing the number 1 seed in the tournament and getting the double bye in the conference tournament. Now, they did it last year as a number 4 seed, but this one just feels obviously much more special because you won the regular season.
Yeah, and it's incredibly hard to win the regular season. You know, there's been a lot of discussion about, kind of getting into the conference tournament and getting into the NCAA tournament as conference champions versus the winner of the regular season. But, one of the things I think Coach Aston said, which is really true, is it's very hard to be the regular season champion and to go through 17 games and win 17 out of 18 games. I mean, that's just incredible to continue at that pace and to kind of keep that same level of dedication, of focus, throughout the season. It's a lot easier to just get hot in the tournament.
I think you hit it with the level of focus because there have been distractions. We did sit out Jordan over in Tampa. So, when we played South Florida, we lost to South Florida because obviously Jordan wasn't playing at all. She was there, she just didn't play. And, maybe we still lose with Jordan, but the fact of the matter is you've got one of your big-time players out. Mm-hmm. We had Maya Linton out, who has turned out to be this defensive stalwart now for UTSA. We had Sydney Love out for a game. So it feels like there has been, at least one player out. There's been some, again, that adversity that we were talking about. And I would say for most teams, you hit that lull and you end up dropping a game. But this team just persevered. But the other part to it is, and it's everything that we've talked about up to this point in the season, is that they're just so deep.
Yeah.
That's the other part to it, is that if they didn't have the talent level that they had, maybe in the previous seasons, maybe we were talking about something different here, but it's just been Coach Aston and the coaching staff just absolutely killing it on the recruiting trail and bringing in talent after talent. And because of it, as we already said, number 1 seed in tournament, but because we also won the regular season in the AAC, UTSA has secured an auto bid to the WBIT tournament. They were in the WNIT last year, which is sort of like a secondary postseason tournament, but the WBIT is kind of like the NIT in the men. you have the NCAA tournament, and then you're going to have the WBIT. So we know there's going to be postseason play.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, certainly the goal is still to get into the NCAA tournament, but we know if we don't win the conference and if we don't get the at-large bid, we will be playing in the postseason for sure.
Absolutely. And obviously the goal is the NCAA tournament. That's always a goal, I think, for every single team going into the season. So that's where we're headed towards. But this is hot off the press, Atos. I was looking up some, and I'm sure everybody's going to know by the time they hear this episode, but
right.
As we record this, I was looking up some information on South Florida, and I happened to stumble across, when I Googled South Florida women's basketball, I saw that Sammy Puises, their star player, had been named to the first team All AAC, and I was like, that's weird. Why haven't we seen anything from UTSA or from other schools? Like AAC hasn't said a word about this. So that's how it all happened. Here's what we found out though: Jordan Jenkins has won Player of the Year. Coach Aston has won AAC Coach of the Year, and Nina De Leon Negron has won Newcomer of the Year in the AAC. Congratulations to all three women. They obviously. What a season from all three of them.
Yeah, and Coach Aston was named unanimously as the Coach of the Year, which is even more impressive that every single one of her peers said she absolutely deserves that. So not that it wouldn't mean as much as if it wasn't unanimous, but it certainly tells you that, she is recognized and respected by all of her peers.
And I think they also realized just how difficult it was to really maneuver throughout the whole season. I'm sure they all saw UTSA at one point and thought, we can beat them.
I'm sure they've all thought we should have beat them.
Right. And I think that's where a lot of the respect comes from, the moves that Coach Aston made, her and her coaching staff. I mean, obviously this is going to me, most likely be shared with the rest of the coaching staff because they have done a fantastic job. But
yeah,
just amazing to see Nina come in from UIW and be that key piece, which we could go on and on, as you said before, about all these players, but and be the Newcomer of the Year. And that just leads us to saying also Nina and Adara Udo have been named to the second team All AAC team, with Jordan being a unanimous first team selection. Absolute no-brainer. Jordan has been at an elite level all season. I know that Tamisha Lampkin from North Texas is, I think, just as deserving of this award, but I mean, you've got to give it to the best player on the best team.
Right, absolutely.
I just don't think that Lampkin had done enough to surpass Jordan, even though she had a fantastic season herself. But when they went head-to-head, Lampkin was shut down by this UTSA team. So that, to me, had to be a big difference in all of this.
Yeah, absolutely. And, both Lampkin and Jordan are, of course, first-team selections as well. So.
Yeah. Well, we looked back. So we were just going to go from just, oh, hey, we secured a bid to the WBIT and then go into this next thing. But, this all came off hot of the press, like I said, and just had to sneak this in here as we recorded. But we actually went back to the first time that we actually knew of Coach Aston being hired by UTSA. And we used a pun for our episode title. We said a slam dunk hire for UTSA. It's a bad pun, but you know what? It worked because Coach Aston has been a terrific hire for UTSA. I took a look back at what our Hail Mary shot was, and I said, with your support, I think you were like, all right, if you think it, throw it out there. But our Hail Mary shot was that Aston would make us relevant in 3 years. And Atos, safe to say, I mean, I could argue in 2.
Sure.
But I would say by year 3, she completely made us relevant. And now we sit at the top on year 4.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think anybody thought that, looking at where we were at the time she came in, with just having won 2 games the year before, that we were going to get to this point this quickly. But I mean, she has certainly exceeded expectations,
to say the least. And honestly, it's the house/program that Aston built.
Right.
Thanks to her and her staff. I mean, she has talked about the fact that she has had very little turnover in her staff, and that has helped. Mm-hmm. But it's her. Much like with Coach Traylor, you see the parallels again with, women's basketball and football. I think it's safe to say that if we didn't think of this UTSA women's basketball team as the queens of the Convo before, they're obviously just absolute queens, especially taking home that regular season trophy.
Yeah, definitely 100%.
So let's talk real quick about some of the games since the last time we recorded. We had Rice that we were at in Houston, 57-55. It was a tale of two halves, and you've said that many times before about football and women's basketball.
Yeah, and right before this, we had a similar situation with Memphis, but in that case, it was kind of the other way around, where UTSA really came back in the second half, and I think I had even made a comment, like, I think we're the second half team.
Yeah.
And then we go to Rice, and apparently we were the first quarter team there, because the lead that we built in that first quarter, we were able to sustain throughout the next three quarters, because they were less than impressive quarters themselves.
Yeah, I mean, we hit 10 field goals in the first quarter, and then we hit 10 field goals the rest of the game.
Right.
3 quarters, we hit 10 field goals. One of these games where it was sloppy, where, terrible weather outside, so maybe it matched the play inside. We thought we were going into a hornet's nest here with Rice coming on a senior day. I still don't know how they pulled it out. And I think that's going to be a theme as we talk about a few more of these games here.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, Tulane, 77-73, way too many turnovers in that first quarter. It looked like the continuation of the sloppy play from Rice. I know for certain that I looked over at you and said, this has got to be it, right? This has got to be loss number 2 in the conference.
Yeah, I would say the Tulane game was probably the one that I felt the most nervous about, just based on how we were playing. I thought, it felt like that South Florida game where there was a part of me that just knew we were going to lose. And I haven't felt that way in the other games. Like, even when we were at Rice and it was getting close, it's like they're going to pull it out. I felt confident. I felt good. But Tulane, I was admittedly very nervous about that one. But it was interesting because, Coach Aston said at the end of the game that there were 2 or 3 winning, or she called them extra effort plays, that she felt like really turned the momentum. And the ones that she pointed out were Jordan had a tip in where Asia had shot a 3. She missed it. Jordan was able to get the rebound. There was another play where Maya picked up a loose ball. It was just kind of this errant pass. She gets the ball. She gets fouled. She makes her free throws. And then there was one more added in by Andy Everett where he said, there's a deflected ball. Adara gets the rebound, gets the putback and the foul, and makes the free throw. And those, 3 plays just really turned the momentum, and they were at the very end of the game. But once those things happened, it was kind of a series of events. You just felt like, oh, okay. All right, well, I guess we got this.
Well, and it's like we started talking about at the very beginning of this, where Tulane made some errors. They didn't grab the rebound. They, throw the ball away, and UTSA is there to pounce. Right. And that's been the season, right? In this game, when it felt like everybody, our normal players, normal starters, are a little off, Asia Proctor comes in and scores a season high 16 points.
Yeah, we definitely saw the Asia Proctor that we saw in her freshman season, those flashes. And it was just really, I thought, a really great moment to see her just really get that confidence at a moment when UTSA needed her to step in and have that confidence.
Absolutely. And the reason to call out Asia here is because here's a player that had an impact in her freshman year. She's got a rough start to this season. She sat out for a few games, and then she comes and returns back to this team. And it took her a while. We talked about it. It took her a little while to get going again. She gets going. And again, like you said, at the right time. But the depth of this UTSA team, to be able to look down the bench and say, Asia, I need you. And she comes in and delivers. Just absolutely wonderful. And then, of course, we get to UTSA's senior day, which, by the way, I first got to mention that picture of Jordan and Nina that they used to promote that game.
The Last Dance.
The two of them, like Nina just hugging and leaning on Jordy. That got me a little bit. I was like, I am not an emotional person, but I was like, ooh, okay, you're playing with my emotions, UTSA, because that was probably the sweetest, I think, just best picture I could have imagined for those two.
Yeah.
And Nina's only been here almost a full season. I mean, honestly.
Like not even an entire year.
Yeah, exactly. And just how beloved she's become here at UTSA speaks to just her play and just her personality. But that was, I thought, just so sweet. It was a great day. This team comes out pretty much, trying to get through this game. Let's be honest. They knew going into this game that they had won a share of the regular season title. They just wanted to celebrate because they were going to have a celebration at the end. So the senior day happens before the game. We were able to see it. Very sweet seeing, Nina and Jordy up there. And then we play the game. It gets a little sloppy too. It's a little rough. But I got to tell you, there were times where I wanted to look over at you and say, how are we this far up? Like, it just felt like it shouldn't be.
It finally, it was a game where we had a lead by a comfortable margin. And I think that made it all the more special. I mean, the crowd was still in the game, even though we had this big lead. It never really kind of got to that lull because I think there was just this electric mood in the Convo that I don't think you or I have ever felt in all of the games that we've been there over all of the years that we've, gone to games in the Convo. It was just a really special feeling. And it was really nice to see them have a comfortable win.
It was, and then for them to celebrate at the very end with, I love the way that our freshman, specifically Mia Hammonds, I got to call her out because she was having the time of her life, playing with that confetti and throwing it everywhere. First year on the team, her, Taylor Ross, Damara Allen, Amelia Danbauer. But it was Mia and just that smile, just kind of running around, celebrating. Those are the moments where you're so happy for the team and you just like metaphorically want to go out there and hug them because it's just that joy and that sweetness that they have. We're able to see the cut down the nets. That was also probably one of the coolest moments to have. We recorded a lot of it. Luckily, I was able to give a recording of to Cam Miles, assistant coach, show him a clip of that, and he was happy about it. But I thought there would be a lull going into East Carolina. They were going to have to go out to Greenville.
It was such a physical game the last time they played. It got so chippy. I mean, we had Maya get ejected. It was just one of those games going into it where, there was a lot of discussion among fans of, okay, how is Coach Aston going to approach this game? Is she going to rest the starters? Is this game going to get chippy? Is there going to be a lot of foul trouble, an ejection? Is it going to be a close game? Or, is this going to be the one game where it's kind of a trap game, right? You've already won the championship. You know that you're going, into the tournament as the number one seed. It's got all of those, kind of typical trappings, right? And then once again, a nice, comfortable win.
UTSA comes out and just suffocates ECU again. The ECU that we had played before, especially in the first time last year, I thought ECU is always going to be just a problem. It's really, I think, Temple that's more of a problem. This year, obviously, we beat Temple, but the way that UTSA went into Greenville and just absolutely just sucked the air out of that Coliseum, it not only put you at ease, but it was nothing of what we were expecting to see because they took care of business. They went in there, they blew out East Carolina. It's 67-48, but let's be clear. We were blowing them out so bad in the first half that I think we let off our foot off the gas. But
Sure.
I mean, let's be honest. Almost we get a 19-point win, and I think the biggest critique I have is that it could have been worse.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
and I'm saying that as nice as possible because really ECU continues to look like they're just looking for answers against this UTSA team. That first game, they had all sorts of problems, and it continued. They come out shooting. I'm going to say these numbers. In the first half, they shot first quarter 15%, the second quarter 6%. If you remember, they shot 6% or something around that. I think it was 6, maybe 5, something like that in the first game against UTSA. Bless their hearts. They just don't have anything they can do to combat UTSA. So to your point, a very comfortable win to end the season and then lead us into this. Let's start talking real quick, and it's going to be a little fun. The latest ESPN bracketology has UTSA still at a 13 seed, potentially playing number 4 seed Kansas State in Manhattan, Kansas. Atos. A little fun fact here, but Coach Aston's wife, Claire, is a KSU alum.
She is.
Was a star at KSU. I mean, not like you reached out or anything, but just your thoughts. How does Claire react to that possible matchup?
Well, first of all, I was afraid to reach out to ask her her thoughts. Yeah, it's going to be really interesting if this ends up being the matchup because Claire bleeds purple. She is Kansas State fan through and through, a very proud alumni. How do you root against your wife, the AAC Coach of the Year? Like, how do you do that? So I don't know how she's going to handle it. I think she's really going to be torn. I think that would obviously be a tough situation because you want them both to win, and that can't happen.
Right. My take is pretty much the same as yours. It's just that it's going to be a matchup that she would dread because, like you said, she bleeds purple, and I just can't see how, especially being around these young women all the time. I mean, she gets to see every single one of these women's basketball players up close and personal, gets to know many of them. So it's just those relationships, but to wear purple in front of them, it would be so difficult for him. But
yeah, I certainly would not want to be sitting anywhere near her in that game if that was the case.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I just thought it'd be fun to bring up.
Sure.
As we go into our tournament preview for the UTSA women's basketball team, I will say this before we start talking about UTSA. In my opinion, the hottest team going into the tournament is Temple, with Tulsa close behind. Temple was just mowing down opponents late in the season. They beat a few opponents by like 20 points, and they were on the road. They went to Tulane and took care of Tulane handily. They beat up on Rice in Philadelphia. So this is a Temple team that when they played us, you could tell that they don't have the bench that they did last season when they were just blowing out UTSA in both games. But still a dangerous team. Tulsa also, they took down South Florida. ECU, I think, ends up taking down South Florida as well. So South Florida is limping in.
Right. They are definitely limping into the tournament. They've lost the last couple. And frankly, they're just lucky that Tulane game wasn't going to matter because they were supposed to play this makeup game that ended up getting canceled because it wasn't going to really impact the standings.
Right.
But that could have been one more loss heading into the tournament for them. And I think that would have been really demoralizing.
And Tulsa just has really played well down the stretch, much like Temple has. Now, this could all mean nothing, right? Because you do have 2 players on each team. Delaney Crawford for Tulsa is just on a roll heading into the tournament. She just has been hot. Like, she's a good player, first of all. I think she's going to be first team or is first team all AAC. But against UTSA, she looked much more ordinary, right? And that, I think that's the difference here when you start looking at some of these players come up against UTSA. Tiara East for Temple is also sort of in a hot scoring streak as she comes down the stretch. So that's why these 2 teams have been hot. They've got some really good players that are playing well for them. So let's talk real quick about UTSA because we'll then get into more of who we think will play, UTSA will play against, and maybe who they'll come up against in future matchups. So they first will face the winner of UAB and Rice. in the quarterfinals on Monday, March 10th at high noon, essentially in Fort Worth, Dickies Arena. Neither of these teams are playing great ball. Would say that Rice, in particular, they're limping into the tournament. They limped in the tournament last year, and they managed the tournament and were able to win all of their games to win the AAC. I don't see that happening this year. This team doesn't look as strong as it did last season. But my Hail Mary shot here is that UTSA ends up playing UAB, because I think UAB has been playing well enough down the stretch where I think they can take care of Rice. So I'm saying it's UTSA versus UAB on Monday. I'll tell you guys right now, UTSA is going to have to defend that 3-point line against UAB. UAB is a big 3-point shooting team once they get hot behind the line, and one of the weaknesses of UTSA's defense has been that 3-point line defense. So just something to think about should we go up against UAB, which I think is what's going to happen on Monday.
Yeah, and you talked a lot about Tulsa and Temple, but if UTSA advances, they will play the winner of Temple, Tulsa, Charlotte, FAU. So it's Charlotte and FAU first. That winner then plays Tulsa. That winner then plays Temple. So, you just mentioned two of those teams, Temple and Tulsa, as being hot going into the conference tournament, dangerous teams. And we're going to likely face one of them unless Charlotte or FAU can do us a solid and upset them.
Yeah, I don't see Charlotte or FAU upsetting Tulsa. I honestly don't. I think it's going to be Temple and Tulsa. And I know that that's chalk if you're looking at it in terms of where the upset's going to happen. Now, as I say all this, anything can happen, right?
Sure.
Any of it can happen.
It is March.
Yeah, exactly. But I think it's going to be Tulsa, Temple in the quarters up again, and then the winner plays UTSA, because I think UTSA is going to take care of UAB. UTSA can handle, I would say, Tulsa, Charlotte, and FAU. I mean, Charlotte and FAU, obviously, we don't think we're going to be there, but Tulsa, we can handle them. They are hot, but we've got the players to be able to stifle Tulsa. My concern is Temple. It's not because Temple is hot coming in. It really is more the fact that Temple, I think, is just a tough team. And there's a toughness that mimics what UTSA brings to the table. So that's where my concern resides. I think Temple is the one that could end the UTSA season in this tournament, and really just in this, just their stay in the tournament, I should say, not end their season. In the bottom half of the bracket, I would say look out for North Texas, Tulane, and possibly ECU. I just don't think that South Florida. I just think that they're just limping in, and they may win their first game, but I just don't see them prevailing in the semifinals. I've been watching them play basketball, and it just looks like they're running out of gas. They're a deep enough team where I wouldn't have gotten that from them, but they just look like this is it. Like they're running on empty. So maybe this time off gives them that extra jolt they need, but it also is going to get them rusty. I mean, they have not been shooting the ball well. They've been struggling with turnovers. All of that for a team that's supposed to be it. They were once thought to be one of the first four out for the NCAA tournament. They are no longer and have been banished from the first four out now after these last two losses. So nobody really sees them getting into the tournament. So it's not going to be a two-bid league, I think, should UTSA win this tournament. There might be a case for South Florida had UTSA won it or UTSA loses the USF in the tournament championship, but I don't see it. So here's my Hail Mary shot for this. We beat Temple and we played Tulane in the championship game. That's my shot. I've done some research, but I will say that just based on what I've seen and from what I've seen from past history in the AAC tournament and how I see these teams kind of playing, it's just tough to count out UTSA until they prove to us that they're capable of losing, and we know they are, but I just don't see them. I think if they do lose, it'll be in the championship game.
Yeah, and for those of you who will be going to the conference tournament, like we will be, there was an email sent out today about a couple of different opportunities to either be at the hotel to send off the team before each of the games. And then there's also a meeting of the UTSA Alumni Association before the semifinal and final games. So assuming that we're in those games. So check your email, look at social media for opportunities to not only be at the games, if you're in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, but also to have an opportunity to interact with the team and with other fans that are there celebrating as well. Well, I was worried that I might have jinxed the men's team by saying how close they were to matching last year's wins, but they have one more game to go, and they have now matched the win total for last season, both overall and in conference. They're sitting at 11-18 overall, 5-12 in conference. Like I said, they've got one more opportunity to exceed that in the regular season, as well as, other opportunities in the conference tournament. And if we beat Charlotte this week on Sunday, we can finish no lower than the 11th seed.
So we won't be in that play-in game.
Absolutely.
So, which is important because the last couple seasons we've been in that play-in game. And that's tough. You essentially have the longest road to try to get to the championship. And, it's an impossible road because you have to go up against the essentially cream of the top of this, men's AAC conference. So let's catch up on a few games here too. We had South Florida, which is such a rough game to watch. And it's a common theme, which is we build a lead, but we can't sustain it. We struggle with trying to get the easy baskets on offense. And you need those drives to the basket to put a team away. But the problem is if you're not shooting well from inside the 3-point line, if you're shooting well from the outside the 3-point line, of course you're going to go and you're going to shoot from 3-point land. The problem is too there is that there's long rebounds. There's, could be one and dones as you go down the court. So it leads to your opponent having an opportunity to start catching up. And South Florida, of course, got a little hot, and that just started really the ball rolling down the hill as it just became difficult for UTSA to put South Florida away. And again, mistakes, just some careless mistakes, things that I don't think that Coach Clonch anticipated would be issues. So South Florida happens. We then go out to Greenville. We talked about how UTSA Women went into Greenville and took care of business there. It looked like the men a week earlier would be able to go into Greenville and steal a win.
Right.
But it didn't happen.
Yeah. I mean, we managed to get to overtime, and that was the first overtime we've had this season, but we just ran out of steam once we got there.
And really, again, it was a tale of the same thing with South Florida, right? They got a lead in the second half and just can't sustain it, right? Like they just cannot. Really, what it comes down to the fact is they need to be able to have a big guy down low or somebody to get those easy baskets. And this team, even though it's athletic, is not built for those easy baskets and to get those easy scores.
I mean, a lot of times you have, Joe Smith down low, and he even said himself in one of the post games, most of the guys have 50 or 60 pounds on me, and he's doing a great job, and he's really trying, to be that post guy, but he just doesn't have the right body type for that. It would be helpful if we had Mo healthy, and perhaps next season we'll see more of that, but just kind of one of those situations that, we're having to deal with because of all of the injuries this season.
Yeah. And again, we're playing with about a 7 to 8 man rotation. It's just, and there have been games where we have been missing that 8th man. So we're down really to 7. And that just makes it so difficult. So you come to senior day against Rice. This one, I don't know how it got away. This one, I really don't. I don't remember how this really got going, but for some reason we were able to essentially get a lead, and then we built upon it and we're able to sustain it.
Yeah, I just really think that the seniors were so motivated to get this win because they had been on a 6-game losing streak at this point, and most of those games were, very, very close games or games that we had an opportunity to win. And so you could just see the determination in Primo's eyes in particular. Like, he was going to win this game no matter what. And, fortunately, we did, and we won by a comfortable margin, 84-56. Like you said, all of a sudden we looked up and it was like, wow, we have this really great lead. We are dominating Rice. They're really struggling to shoot. They really just looked very off, and we look so focused that game. And it was just such a wonderful way for them to celebrate senior day, to be able to not just win the game, but win it in a dominating fashion.
Yeah, and really, I gotta say, Smurf Millender has been having a really strong finish to the season. We've been out to the coach's radio show a few times and been able to talk to Coach Clonch, and I mentioned to him, I really think Smurf's just been playing really well down the stretch, and he said, yeah, he really has, and he also mentioned that Smurf really loves it here. So it's great to see, because it's another year potentially for Smurf to be here under Clonch. So Another year in the system, a returning player who knows the playbook, who knows what Coach Clonch wants, and an opportunity for Smurf to lead this team moving forward.
Yeah.
And it becomes Smurf Millender's team, right? And so now you start adding parts. And, he's a really good point guard, to be honest with you. He handles the ball well. He can shoot the ball well. It's just now making sure that we're able to get that depth and build that depth around him. And so it's good to see that he's doing that. It was also good to see during the Rice game that we were really attacking that basket. And I really have to mention that, because we started off by talking about South Florida, where they just struggled not getting those easy baskets and attacking. If you're not shooting well, at the rim, it's going to be a rough game, no matter how big or how small your team is. So it was, I'm hoping that they continue to play in that manner, because I think it helps them be even more competitive. Because when that 3-point shot isn't falling, you got to do something else. You can't just fall in love with the 3-point shot, which they have at times this season, which leads us to Memphis now. We have number 1 Memphis come into the Convo. I think the two of us were just expecting a blowout.
Yeah, certainly. And, the fact that this game was so close really throughout the entire game was, I think, just a testament to how this UTSA team really is much better than what their record will show.
Yes. And
I also think the Memphis team is a little bit overrated. I might have said that 1 or 2 times at the game.
1 or 2 times. She said it multiple times.
Mostly it was directed somewhere else. But anyways, this game, it was interesting, though, because it's got surprisingly chippy, particularly at the end of the game.
Yeah.
I think part of it was, look, Penny Hardaway also expected to come into the Convo and to have a dominant game and beat us by a large margin, regardless of the fact that they were only 8.5-point favorites. He came in pregame with signing autographs for, different people. I just really think he came in very confident and very overconfident in his team. And as you watched the game, you could just see him getting frustrated that his team was not playing that well, because I think he underestimated the talent on the UTSA team.
I don't know that he saw, or at least in my opinion, I don't know that he thought the team didn't play well. I just think that they were surprised at how good UTSA actually was.
Mm-hmm.
And, you can be the worst team in the league or near the bottom of the league and still be a good team, as you mentioned before. And, for me, I don't think Penny has a lot of skins on the wall. I don't think he knows how to make adjustments. And Austin Clonch, I think, was able to make those adjustments and get us close to a win there. And let's go back and rewind a year. Coach Henson went into Memphis, and I mean, they took it to overtime, and we should have actually honestly won that game during regulation. But there were some iffy calls, and it got Memphis what they needed to be able to take it to overtime, and then they overtook us. But what it really came down to is the fact that I think that he looks at the Convo, he looks at what UTSA is, and obviously thinks that they're much better than they really are. But this Memphis team, to me, even if you watch them, you're right. They are very much overrated. They're not as good as they really are. They can do some really good things. They have some good individuals, but together when they play as a team, they struggle.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. They're a talented team.
They are, yes.
And particularly when you look at certain levels of competition, but because you can see the ball movement, they move it very quickly. But to say that they should be ranked 16, I think that's really overvaluing them.
Yeah, and I think that there's been all this talk about Memphis, and maybe they should get out of the AAC because it's a bad league. You're going to be at probably near the bottom of another league if you do, because it's. I don't know why you wouldn't want to just try to, if you believe you're as good as you are, that you wouldn't take this as an opportunity to just continue rolling into an NCAA tournament year after year. Again, you're right. It's a talented team, but I don't know that they necessarily play as well together. And I think a lot of it has to do with coaching. I think there's definitely improvements that have to happen there. But I think we really wanted to focus a little bit on what happened at the end of this game.
We definitely have to talk about how everything sort of fell apart right in the last few seconds. It started with Penny Hardaway getting frustrated with, I guess, the clock and thinking that maybe the clock wasn't, stopping when it was supposed to. And so maybe there was not the right time on the clock. And then there was 0.8 seconds left on the clock. UTSA is down by 3. Coach Clonch calls timeout. And I think that Penny Hardaway, was frustrated by the fact that Coach Clonch was calling timeout at that point, and then got very frustrated when the ref initially said that they thought Penny Hardaway is the one who called the timeout.
Right, because they had no timeouts, so that would have been an automatic technical for calling, timeout you don't have. So, yeah, things got crazy, and we were able to hear the refs essentially telling Penny, and we find out later that when they asked the UTSA men, it wasn't the coaches that responded; it was the players that said, "Oh no, we didn't call the timeout." So the refs are like, "Oh, well then Memphis did. They're about to tee him up," and then Memphis loses it. Right? That they're like, "Wait a second, they called the timeout," and Clonch and his assistants did look at the refs and go, "Yeah, we called it," and they were given the sort of 20-second timeout look. So, yeah, all that is happening, and it seems to just like deteriorate. I would say Penny deteriorates from there because he's been having a hard time with the clock management all game.
Right.
And look, every home team has a little bit of advantage when it comes to the clock, right? You start the clock just a little bit slower, when it's the home team. Everybody knows that. But, Penny's over here arguing about that. He's upset about that. Obviously he doesn't like you said, that timeout. There's all this stuff that's kind of piling on in this last minute of the game. They get fouled. We fouled their player. He sinks the 2 free throws, and it's over, right? Game over. Or so we thought.
Yeah, and, honestly, Penny Hardaway should have gotten a technical foul for his behavior on more than one occasion during the game. But then, the game ends. They're, walking through the line to, kind of greet each other like they normally do, say good game, what have you. And we see the way that Penny responds to Austin. Like, he kind of gives him this, like, half-assed, handshake, and it's kind of rude. And you see Austin responding like, what the heck? Like, you won. What are you mad about, right? So he's still, obviously, Penny Hardaway is still hot at this point. And then they kind of linger on the court. And if you haven't been in person to one of the games, the men come over in front of the band to sing the alma mater.
Right.
Where if you're at a women's game, they kind of stand in the middle of the court. But the men's tradition is they walk right in front of the band. Well, that happens to be where the opposing team is. And typically by that point, the opposing team has already walked off.
Yeah.
But because there was this frustration, and I'm not sure exactly what all happened, but I was almost wondering, like, okay, we did know at that point that Memphis had just won at least a share of the title for the regular season. So maybe are they trying to celebrate or do something? Is that why they're still on the court? But then once they do turn, they want to walk right through the team to get out instead of walking around the team who is now gathered to sing the alma mater. The band's playing, and Penny's getting frustrated. And so, of course, there's like chirping between his coaches and our coaches. And so then you see kind of the refs kind of come in to try to separate the group and kind of get them out of the way. And we heard there was this, funny moment where Dr. Campos was actually on the court and said, one of the refs was trying to get the team to move. And she said to them, no, this is where we sing the alma mater. And they looked at her like, who are you? Because she wasn't credentialed. So it just looked, she was some
lady.
Some random lady standing
Yeah.
on the court. But, then security was able to kind of come through and move them out. But actually Penny, as we could see from our perspective, they start to move away from the team. But then Penny tries to walk through the cheerleaders, who are also in the middle of the court doing, singing the alma mater.
But nowhere close to the men. So
No.
that was weird to me why, like, that whole incident happened, right?
Right.
But again, to your point, he's really just frustrated and, just wants to get the hell out of there.
Right. He just can't
He
find
just can't
the door.
find a way. Yeah.
So then you see the cop, kind of come and like escort Penny out. So he basically got escorted across the court, over by where we were sitting to get to the locker room.
And some lady was just telling him he was overrated. So I don't know. I mean, she was chirpy all game. I don't know.
Look.
Yes, that
was
lady was Atos, by the way.
There might have been some players, or in particular, a player named Tyrese Hunter, who is, in my opinion, overrated. But, nonetheless, it was a very competitive game. It's unfortunate that we missed several shots right at the end of the game. We had an opportunity, but, credit to the team because they did have an opportunity to win. And they were actually in very good spirits at the end of the game. I think as frustrating as this season has been at times for them, they know that they're playing well. They're, giving extra effort, and they definitely seem to be enjoying the games, even when they are frustrating losses.
Yeah, they sure are. And, I think that's huge. It's a good building block for Coach Clonch moving forward. So next up, their last game in the regular season, you kind of already mentioned it, against Charlotte at 3 p.m. on ESPN+. Charlotte is currently sitting in last place in the conference. So going to be interesting to see just, how things play out. But I think they can close with a win. All right, so much like the women, we'll do a quick, I think, tournament preview for the men. The thing is, though, since the season hasn't really completely finished, it's tough. I can tell you who I think is going to UTSA will be playing because they're not going to end up, in 12th or 13th place in that play-in game. They will be at an 11, maybe 10 seed. And they're going to be looking to face either FAU or Temple at this point. I think they can upset Temple, but FAU, I think, ends the season for UTSA. And Temple could do the same. There's just not... I think it's just tough to see where this team will be at a neutral site. And with the way this team has really, kind of had to traverse the season, it's been difficult for them. So, we'll see what we can get out of them. Maybe we can get a run. I think they could go on a run. But I think if you're going to say, give me your Hail Mary shot, I'm like, they upset Temple and then they lose in the next round.
Yeah, before we wrap up the men's section, circling back to senior day, there were 3 seniors who took part in senior day: Damari Monsanto, Primo Spears, and Raekwon Horton. Both Joe Smith and Scooter Joseph are considered seniors, but they did not participate. They do have an extra year of eligibility because of the JUCO ruling. So it will be interesting to see if one or both of them comes back to UTSA next season. Certainly not participating in senior day indicates that they're likely to play. The question always is whether or not they'll be, at UTSA or they'll transfer somewhere else. But when you were talking about Smurf and kind of building the team around him next season, having one or both of those guys back and that kind of continuity would be wonderful. So it'll be interesting to see what happens after the season ends, when the transfer portal opens. You just never know what's going to happen, but certainly hope that we see them next season playing for UTSA. Before we go, let's talk about some news from a couple of our other programs.
All right.
Start with softball. They wrapped up their non-conference play with a 12-7 record, which included 2 wins over Power 4 conference programs, Michigan State and Houston.
Some really good wins there by Coach Van. There was a moment where she was dancing in the dugout, and I guess they caught it on No Context college softball, and they just had a gif of her just dancing, right? And all I kept thinking was, that's my coach, right? Like, we've talked a little bit about how I love college softball. I don't know why, I just do. But she was at one of the coaches' radio shows a couple weeks ago, and she was there with Coach Aston, and of course Coach Clonch was there as well. And it was really cool just to see the 3 of them kind of interact with each other and kind of talk a little coach speak with each other. It really just showed to me, and maybe it's just because we've been to these coaches' radio shows and we've been able to see this, but it's just interesting how they interact and how close-knit they seem to be. And maybe they're not as close-knit as I'm making it out to be, but at the very least, always very cordial with each other. They seem to have fun talking with each other. And, I don't know that you see that in a lot of other places. It feels like there's a connection between a lot of these coaches at UTSA, which is really cool. And I think, I hesitate to say family, right? Like, I think that's an overused word when you're talking about a workplace. But, at the very least, there is a tight-knit group that we have where they share their own experiences and how they relate. And Coach Van talked about that when she was on the radio show with, Coach Aston and Andy Everett, and said, look, we reached out to Coach Aston. I said something, and she said, well, it's not always going to be pretty. It's not always going to be. And Coach Van said, yeah, good point. I'll take whatever wins I can get, or I can do whatever I do, right? The progress. So just really cool to see there.
We should also mention that prior to them getting on to the radio show at that point, there was a conversation between Toves, Coach Clonch, Coach Van, Coach Aston, and Coach Aston actually called you out by name in the radio show and made a reference to one of your comments where you were talking about kind of not just that closeness between the coaches, but also between the teams.
Yeah, I talked about the athletes, and I said, I asked Coach Aston, have you seen that in your previous stops? And she said, no. And again, maybe at the bigger schools.
Certainly not to this extent.
Yeah,
right?
But you see, but they did talk about how close they were, how Adara Udo, is always at, and honestly, we've been to some soccer games. We know she's there. She goes to the softball games, but you see these players, and I think to me it shows more of UTSA transforming into that 4-year university that we experienced at other schools, right? That's for the longest time, UTSA has been a commuter school, or has been given the name of commuter school. And when we're seeing, you go to campus now on the weekends and you see kids lingering around and walking around campus, you're like, I don't remember seeing that when I was there at UTSA. So it strikes us as odd, but it's a good odd because it means that growth is there.
Yeah, and to see, these student athletes, not just at the games where they're kind of designated as the run as one games, but just on a regular basis. You see, the men's basketball team supporting the women supporting the men, the football team coming out and supporting both of them. Yeah. You see soccer, you see basketball at the soccer games, you see basketball, you see football, you see all these different sports there, so it really is kind of a a great environment. But getting back to softball, they're about to start their conference play against ECU this weekend at Roadrunner Field. If you're not going to see the women play in Fort Worth, if you're going to be sticking around in San Antonio, have an opportunity to go out and support them. If not, those games are on ESPN Plus.
And they're a fun team to watch. So, Coach Van is a ton of fun. If you ever have a chance to talk to Coach Van, take that short time to get to know her and talk to her, because she will have you laughing. She will have you feeling really good about yourself, and you'll want to run through a wall for her, because she's just a ton of fun. So let's get to UTSA soccer. We did get out to the start of the spring exhibition season before we went to the men's basketball game. Yeah, that's right. We
did a doubleheader, soccer and basketball.
We are UTSA sports groupies. We got out to, it's a UIW scrimmage. We won 3-0. 2 goals scored by freshman forward Brooklyn Bailey, and 1 goal scored by Addie Johnson. Addie did get injured late in that game, but I will say that from what I saw from the match, the women look like they're continuing to improve. Mm-hmm. Last year, it felt like, as much as I taught them up, as much as I said, look, they're getting there, they just seem to kind of plateau at times. And I think it cost them a shot of going into just the conference tournament, because not every team goes to the conference tournament in soccer. So I looking at what I saw, and I know, again, it's just the first game, they look much more organized than they did last season at this time. And you can tell that the talent has elevated just that much more.
Yeah, the speed and the quickness are, again, one notch up from where they were last year.
Right. And you can also see the decision making. And he's, I would say Coach Pittman is kind of tinkering with the lineup and trying to figure out and try players in different positions, mm-hmm. which is adding a lot of versatility. And to your point, that speed. Now, some of that speed is now getting to be on the field and field together. And so they're quick on some of these transitions. They're have done a good job defending. I think, maybe it's just because of the players that they had at the time, depending on the combinations, but the midfield still seemed to be a little bit kind of disjointed. But again, I think that there was a lot of new faces out there. And mm-hmm. again, it's the first game. So we'll see as the spring season progresses just where they get to. But their next up is a game against Houston on Sunday, March 23rd, 2 p.m. at Park West.
And then, of course, the other big news this week was from UTSA football. Their schedule dropped. They will have 2 bye games again this season, one after our last out-of-conference game the week of September 27th, and then one after the North Texas game around October 25th. After that second bye, we'll be going into 2 Thursday night games. And it's been a long time since UTSA has had Thursday night games. And then certainly to have 2 Thursday night games is very different for the team. But it's good that they'll have that following a bye, so that hopefully that compressed schedule isn't quite as cumbersome as it might be if you were coming off of a Saturday night game going to a Thursday game.
Very good point there.
One of those Thursday games will be at the Dome against Tulane. The other Thursday night game will be in South Florida. The last time we had a Thursday night game in the Alamo Dome was 2015, or the last time we had a Thursday night game in general was 2015. We previously had a Thursday night game at the Dome in 2014 against Southern Miss. And I think that was the last season we had 2 Thursday night games in a row, or 2 Thursday night games in a season.
Yeah, it's interesting, but you know what? Getting a chance to highlight ourselves. Obviously, they think, at least the AAC probably thinks that we're going to be up near the top. Hopefully, we are. Obviously, there's going to be some need for improvement in all phases of the game, but certainly excited to start planning trips and start trying to plan, who and what we're going to see at some of these games.
Yeah, and I think a really good schedule in terms of being able to go to some different cities for out-of-conference games. Certainly a lot of flights, not road games, but, there's certainly a lot of games that we're interested in going to. The other thing is just we're playing Army the weekend of Thanksgiving. That game is a Friday or a Saturday game, so we won't really know exactly what day that game falls on until, probably 2 weeks out, just really depending on, how both of those teams are doing and what they think will be the better TV matchup. So,
yeah.
All right. Well, I think that about wraps it up for us on the Hail Married podcast. Thanks for joining us. I'm A Toves.
And I'm the Toves.
We'll be back soon to recap the conference tournament.
Birds up.